Hey guys, so today we're doing my most disappointing reads of 2019 and I'm kind of scared. I don't like talking like really poorly about people's art because I know that people put their heart and soul into their books and I just feel bad, but these just weren't for me, you know? And sometimes books just are not for you. And the thing about some of these books is I don't think that they're like objectively bad books because there's a lot of people that love these books, but to be honest, they just weren't for me and I'm just going to talk a little bit about why. Let's just go ahead and jump right in. So the first book is a very popular one. Now this book I don't really want to say I necessarily think it's a bad book because I'm actually keeping this on my shelf because I think that this book is great for middle schoolers and I want my daughters to read this book, but as an adult I didn't like it. So I can't really say, I guess, necessarily that this book was bad. It just wasn't my cup of tea personally, so if maybe you're an adult, just be aware going in. But like I said, I still want my kids to read it, so I mean, what does that say? I don't know. But it is Stargirl by Jerry Spinelli, and as you guys know, this is coming out this year as a movie on Disney+. And I think that the overall idea of this book was good, but as an adult, I just couldn't help but feel like it was so cheesy. Like, I feel like Stargirl was quirky and cute and stuff, like the epitome of, you know, the manic pixie dream girl, but like for middle schoolers. And there was aspects about her that I really liked, and I think that maybe he did it on purpose to make her very exaggerated, and I think that if I was young, like if I was in middle school, I would look at Stargirl and be like, oh my gosh, like I want to be like her. But as an adult, honestly, she just got on my nerves. I don't know if I'm the only person that thought Stargirl was like really annoying while reading this book, but I'm like, girl, like calm down. The part where they're in the car driving home and she is like dead set on this idea that everyone's gonna be there like cheering her on and holding up signs, and what's his name? I don't remember what his name is, but the main guy that the story is about is kind of like trying to calm her down, you know, like, you know, just maybe not, you know, and he's trying to like calm her down. She's like, no, like there's gonna be so many people and they're just gonna be cheering for me, and she keeps going on and on and on and on, and it just seemed a little outlandish for me, like to the point of like annoyance, kind of, like she was so like outside of reality, and that's like the vibe I got from her. Now I understand what he's trying to do with her, I do. It just wasn't really for me, you know, as an adult. But like I said, this book isn't for me, it is for children. But yeah, I would definitely recommend giving this to your middle schoolers to read. I think it's a good book for middle schoolers, I will say that. But as an adult, be wary, okay? It's a little dorky. Okay, so the next book is a book that I just couldn't get on board with, and it sucks because I know this book is very well loved by a lot of people, and actually a couple booktubers that I adore read this book this year and they both loved it. And so it's just one of those weird feelings where you're like, am I missing something? Like, why don't I like this book? Personally, I just couldn't get on the train, you know? Or on the bus. No pun intended. But it's One Day in December by Josie Silver. So it's basically about a girl and a guy. The girl is on a bus. She sees this guy at a bus stop. They catch eyes and they basically fall in love at first sight. And she tries to get off the bus so she can meet him, but she doesn't get off the bus in time, so she spends the next year looking for busboy because she's in love with him. And even though they never met, and then her friend introduces her to her new boyfriend, and guess who it is? It's a busboy. And they end up spending the next 10 years lusting over each other, even though he's with her best friend. And it's just awkward, and it's weird, and I didn't like it. I don't know. I didn't like the love interest, the guy. I didn't like him. I didn't like his personality. He was whiny, and it's so hard for me to like a romance if I don't like the love interest. And the other thing too is I didn't like the main character either. And so the whole time I was like, but your friend deserves him just as much as you do. Like I couldn't ship the main protagonist with the guy more than I could ship her friend with the guy. Like I felt like her friend deserved the guy just as much as she did. Like what, you saw him on a bus one time and now you think that you like deserve him? And after 10 years or something, I think it's like 10 years. It's like a long time in this book. They just are playing this weird cat and mouse game. and it just seems so unfair to her friend. I don't know, this whole book to me just rubbed me the wrong way. Another thing that this book had in it that really bothers me in romance novels, I wouldn't say this is I mean, I guess it's kind of a spoiler, so if you want to read this, then maybe skip forward. But this is one of those books where it's literally like this romance that you're like hoping for like the entire time, and then they finally kiss or get together at the very end. It's like the closing pages, like the conclusion of the story. They kiss within like the last 2 pages and then the story's over. So you're basically like just waiting for this moment the entire book, and it just feels like so anticlimactic to me. I don't know, it's just not something I like in romance novels. It feels very disappointing, like I feel let down to a certain degree. But one thing that I can say about this novel is it's not very smutty. So if you don't like smut, then this is a great romance for you, because it definitely doesn't have that. It's more romance driven versus like smut driven, if you know what I mean. So the next book is a book I actually DNF'd, which I don't DNF very often, you guys. Like, it's rare when I DNF, but this one I just couldn't get into, and I just put it down and then I never picked it back up, basically. And it is Dry by Neal Shusterman, and this was in my top 10 I want to read in 2019. So this book is basically about California running out of water, and this girl Alyssa has to take care of her little brother. Her parents go missing and they only have like a bathtub full of water, and she's trying to conserve, she's trying to find more water. And I tried it, but I just couldn't get into it. And I don't know if it was that I just didn't feel attached to the characters. There was something about Alyssa, the main character, that I wasn't fully attaching to. And then there was some like side plot lines that kind of would pop in here and there with like these other characters, but I didn't really care about those characters like at all. So every time those like side plots would come up, I'm like, who are these people? I do not care about these people. Like, I was just like not into it, which is weird because I love survival stories. I think it's because maybe I like nonfiction survival over fiction survival. I feel like fiction survival just, I know it's not real, so it's not as like entertaining to me. The next book is Wilder Girls by Rory Power. This was a really popular book this year. So many people read this, and this was another one of those books that a lot of people loved, but a lot of people didn't love. I think it was like one of those split right down the middle type of books for people. And honestly, this book felt very debut novel-y to me. There was a lot of loose threads that were not wrapped up. There was a lot of like interesting plot points that were never kind of woven into the story, a lot of things that were forgotten. The characters didn't feel very connected. Like, there was a best friend relationship in this novel, and I didn't feel like they were connected. She told us they were connected, but she didn't show us they were really close. And so I was just like, I'm not really rooting for these people. I'm not somebody that likes novels that have a lot of loose ends and that are very open-ended, and I feel like this novel, the best way to describe it in one word is vague. I felt like I was kind of in a dream while reading this novel in a weird way. I talked about this more in another video. I kind of went more into detail about what I didn't like and how there were certain parts that were just not tied in and stuff like that. For example, I'll give you guys one example. There's this whole entire scene where it's like a flashback of one of the characters, and she kind of goes into being a compulsive liar, and she's talking about how she lied and how she used to lie a lot. And then it talks about this whole lie that she told to her mom and how it got out of hand. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, so she's a compulsive liar. Like, how is this going to tie into the story? It never got brought up again for the rest of the story. Not a single time did lying come up in the story again. It was just a scene that was really interesting, but it had no point whatsoever. And I'm just like, what? I love the cover, but that's about the only thing, sadly. So next up is Obsidio by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. And this is the third book in the Illuminae trilogy. Loved Illuminae, loved Gemina, didn't love Obsidio. Obsidio was just super repetitive. It felt like I was reading the same novel for the third time. The characters were so bland and boring, and they all were exactly the same. All the relationships were the same. The character dynamics were the same. Like, every time I read a new character, like, they literally sounded exactly like every other character in this book. And honestly, it makes me kind of nervous to read Nevernight, which I have on my shelf back here, and I really want to read it, but I'm scared that Jay Kristoff did the same thing with that book as he did with this book. He made all the characters sound exactly the same, and I don't like that. Literally, they're all snarky, they're all sarcastic, they're all like witty and jokey, and That's fine if one character is like that, but I would love to see some characters maybe being a little bit more weak, a little bit more timid, maybe a little more shy, maybe more scared or anxiety ridden, but none of them are like that. They're just all the same. So I just didn't really like this book, and not a lot happened in it, to be honest. It was one of those books where they're just basically preparing through the entire book for one big scene at the very end. And so I found it really boring, especially in this particular format. It kind of added to the bore aspect of it, which I felt like this format worked in Illuminae and Gemina, but for some reason this format with like all the transcripts and emails and stuff made this book feel even more boring. So it just didn't work with this one. And what's crazy is out of all the books I read in 2019, this has the highest overall rating on Goodreads. And this had like my lowest rating on Goodreads. So yeah, not a fan. I gave it 2 stars. And then last but not least was a book that really disappointed me, and I actually gave this book 1 star. I don't know. I have a hard time like deciding when to give a book 1 star. Like I feel like no book really deserves 1 star. But it was Beneath the Sugar Sky by Seanan McGuire. So I read Beneath the Sugar Sky, Down Among the Sticks and Bones, and Every Heart a Doorway. Beneath the Sugar Sky was so hard for me to read, and that book is only what, like 180 pages or something? Like I don't even think they hit the 200 mark. And I forced myself to read it because it was such a short book, but I almost put that down and didn't continue with it. But I was like, Kara, just read it, it's short. Like it was one of those books where you feel like you're like trudging through mud to get to the end. And I have no idea why this book did this to me. Like I don't know if it was the characters. She did bring in some new characters that we hadn't met before in this book, and I had zero connection to these characters, which I feel like Seanan McGuire does okay with creating characters, especially in such a short amount of time. But this book, I just felt so disconnected from every character. The world I was disconnected from, for some reason, this is one of those weird books that I can't really even put my finger on why I didn't like it. Usually I can tell you why, but this book, I can't. I just didn't. It just wasn't my thing. And this is actually the book that made me stop reading the Wayward Children trilogy, or not trilogy, series. Maybe the next book is better. I've actually heard In an Absent Dream is better, but I just couldn't do it. So the next book is a book called The Soul of an Octopus, and this was a book that I wanted to read for a long time. It had been on my TBR, on my Goodreads for a while, and I ended up reading it. Man, oh man, was this one hard to get through. So it started out strong. This book is basically a nonfiction book about a woman's like journey through loving octopuses basically. And the first part of the book was really good. It was very like fact-based. You got a lot of information on octopuses, and it was actually quite interesting. But it crashed and burned so freaking fast, and it got so boring. I didn't know where she was going with this novel. This was one of those nonfiction memoir style novels that go completely off the rails because they start really focusing on their feelings, and it was my journey and my spiritual growth and what getting to know octopuses did for me. And she started going off on these life tangents, like when she got certified in scuba, which I didn't care about that at all. She seemed a little bit disconnected from reality at times. Like she wanted to get herself an octopus and put it in her house, and I'm like, girl, you can't just get an octopus. Like, it just came across as a little bit pretentious in this weird way. She kept kind of like saying like, and I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this. It was kind of like she wanted a cookie for like everything that she did. And don't get me wrong, like her experiences would have been amazing, but it came across more of like a bragging style. It was very repetitive. Like there was one point where she talks about putting her hands in an octopus tank and then like wrapping their arms around her arms and how weird that it felt. But she literally repeated that at least 7 times in this novel about reaching her hands in a tank and having the octopus like grab her arms and how that felt and what it was like. She talked about that so many times in this novel, and I was like, I already know this. Like, you already said it like 4 times. Like, I don't need another whole reenactment of what it's like. And I just didn't love this book. It wasn't what I was expecting it to be. It was more of her personal journey versus like interesting facts about octopuses, which is kind of what I was hoping for, but I didn't quite get. But I can tell you the beginning is good. So if you want to like get this from the library and maybe read like the first few chapters, you could do that, because I did like the beginning, just not like most of it, most of the end. So Anyways guys, that is it for my most disappointing reads of 2019. I read mostly good books I would say this year, but there was a few that crashed and burned, so comment down below what your all-time favorite book was in 2019 and what your all-time least favorite or biggest disappointment, I guess I should say, of 2019 was. I'm really curious. And I think that's it guys. I will see you in my next video.